Welcome, in the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful. My name is James Mahdi, and this is my colleague, Dr. Irfan Mahdi.
Hello, and welcome to the show.
And we are coming here today from the Black Banners of the East Satellite Channel with the Pandemic Show. And this is our second episode, and we are coming here to give you so much wisdom, so much knowledge, and so much amazing proofs that we are indeed in the end times. In the previous episode, we looked into the eschatology from different religions, from Abrahamic religions, and this was from Judaic law, from Christian books, and from Islamic books. And we showed you how these are indeed the signs, because at the end times we talked about there would be earthquakes in uncommon places, and today we see that in the likes of Croatia in Europe. We looked into the blood rivers that have been coming up all over the world, and remarkably, we saw how there was even the ice was bleeding in Antarctica. And these are the birthing pangs. But these are greater than the birthing pangs. This is a sign that this is now the apocalyptic times. And the apocalypse means the unveiling of the truth. It doesn't mean that it is the end and that we are unable to move forward. There is always hope in such times, but it is a stark reminder. And this is not a time where we can distract ourselves with bread and circuses anymore. And it seems that these things that we have taken for granted as bread and circuses, even the sports fixtures, have all come to an end now, because it's a clear sign that we are moving into a very different time where we have to wake up to ourselves. The global village has been brought to its knees. And fundamentally, we say from the ancient scriptures that closer and closer to mankind comes their reckoning, yet they heed not and they turn away. But likewise, as we said in the previous episode, corruption has indeed appeared on the lands and sea on account of what the hands of men have wrought. But the punishment has come, at least they may return. And that's where hope springs eternal, Doctor, because there is hope. There is going to be a hope amongst this despair that we see with these pandemics and pestilence.
Right, exactly. So, yes, we just wanted to, first of all, I just wanted to welcome all of our English-speaking audience to the second episode of our live English show on the Black Banners of the East Satellite Channel. We believe that we are the channel in this time to bring you the light in the midst of the doom and gloom that is the coronavirus. We, as a species, stand at a crossroad at this moment in history, where we are faced with the biggest crisis that we have ever seen since World War II. And the coronavirus really has given us the opportunity to reflect on our values, reflect on what is truly important to us. And we hope that with the new information we'll share with you on the show today, that you can make more sense of the extreme measures that are being taken by our governments and give you an insight into the reality and gravity of the situation.
Yes, indeed. And like we said previously, and we reiterate, at the time of Noah, peace be upon this wise sage, he was saying how the people were literally busy with their own affairs. They were busy working, they were busy getting married and doing all these things at the same time as the hour was upon them. And it's a sign for always that the people need to be waking up and not taking these things as entertainment or signs of something just to distract them, because this is a true reality now. And as we've indicated, that the figures are very clear. However, the figures that are coming out through the media and through the government outlets perhaps might leave a bad taste in your mouth, because the true picture may be different. But let's just declare what they've actually said. And this is coming through a monitoring website, which says that they've declared that now over 1.2 million cases, with over 180 nations affected and 64,000 deaths. Now, these are dramatically large figures, yes, indeed. But when we consider the kind of indicators, what has happened as a result of these figures, we must reflect on the likes of H1N1, where the figures were also similar, if not greater than these numbers, and yet there was no lockdown. Right. There was no widespread lockdown like this. And interestingly, this monitoring form has linked to government agencies and local media outlets, and it seems to be that the source of some of these top universities like Johns Hopkins are taking their knowledge from here. Right. So it seems like it's almost like how in the time of the media reporting, it links to Reuters and AP, where one agency's gathered all the data, so you can only get news from this one source. Right. How reliable is this? This
is the thing. So the website to which James was referring is, of course, worldometers.info. And this is the website that is having a live tracking count of the numbers of infected cases as well as the numbers of deaths. And like James said, that this is being used by the institutions like really well-known, prestigious institutions like Johns Hopkins universities and others to give us an idea of the impact of the virus globally. And speaking about the numbers, James also mentioned the H1N1 virus, which was a recent phenomenon, and actually in 2009. So those of us, I certainly am old enough to remember in 2009 when H1N1 was being talked about, and it was the last pandemic that we actually had. And yes, so with H1N1 or swine flu, we saw estimates that were from 18,000, according to the World Health Organization, all the way up to 550,000 plus, according to the CDC. So there was always a broad spectrum and a big range for the number of cases. So are the numbers that we're looking at now reflecting the reality on the ground? Do we remember when H1N1 was running riot and rampant and killing over 500,000 people, these measures being taken that are being taken now?
Exactly.
Where 1/3 of the population of the world is on lockdown, where airports are suspending flights and everything is closed down, where you walk in the busy streets of New York, Manchester, London, wherever you are in the West, and anywhere in Europe, you see like a ghost town. So something is not adding up. And there are many other sort of evidences and proofs that we can provide that show that this number is in fact just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, indeed. And please, the numbers are coming up on the screen now through WhatsApp and other medium, and we'd like you to give us a call. Get in touch with us. Please raise any concerns you have, because we are here to raise awareness, but also at the same time, we want you to come to us and ask questions about what's going on. And we can help facilitate and provide answers and encouragement for the people, because that is what we're here for. And of course, the people must need this, because as the doctor kindly noted, if you take the likes of the Lancet reports, where they claimed 280,000 deaths in the case of H1N1, where the CDC, as we said, about 470,000, the WHO only 18,000. This is such a distortion of the facts. This is such a distortion. And this was just with the H1N1. How is it with the likes of Schindler's List that the IBM compatible system was able to give us exact figures of the people that were dying? How is it with all this is going on in the 21st century? This is a problem, but they could do it before with that. Tax burdens. You take tax burdens, how the people are under this pressure, and they can find your numbers for the sake of taxing you, for putting you under pressure when you're working hard for yourselves and your families. But when it comes to a list to prove the cases of people dying of an epidemic, which is a pandemic, they cannot come up with the correct statistics.
Exactly. And James, I think just to look at some of these facts that we're going to provide you with today, just for you to reflect on something to think about. Now, in coronavirus, you have 1/3 of the patients, estimates are saying between 25 and 30% of patients have absolutely no symptoms. In other words, there are 30% of patients out on the streets who have absolutely no symptoms whatsoever, who are giving the infection to other people. That in itself is a huge thing. Now, on top of that, we look at the diagnostic tests that are available. Now, diagnostic tests by their very nature are not 100% accurate. We know this for a fact in the medical community. What we're looking at now is, with coronavirus, infectious disease specialists are saying that this test has a sensitivity of 70 to 75%. What does this mean? This means that in 30% of the cases of patients who are tested for COVID-19, coronavirus, show a negative test.
False negative.
Exactly. A false negative test. And this means that they're walking around, even with symptoms, but the test is saying no, so they're out spreading the virus. So this is a big proof.
It's a ticking time bomb.
Exactly.
Okay, we have a caller. Thank you so much. Please let us know what questions you have.
So we have Suleiman from Egypt. Please go ahead.
Please go ahead. Speak to us. You're most welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, fantastic. James, Dr. Arfan, great to see you guys. Fantastic show, and thanks for all the efforts you guys are putting in.
Thank you so much, caller.
I just wanted to comment on something you just mentioned in relation to if you look at the measures being taken today with this coronavirus versus what was done at the time of SARS, for example, H1N1 and all that. It looks way out of proportion, even though the numbers are actually very similar. Yes. So I do agree. It kind of tells that there's a lot more to it that we're not being told. And I think in relation to that as well, I think we also have to take the numbers and the statistics being told to us with a pinch of salt. Right. Because we also have to understand that the numbers we are shown are in relation to those being tested. And we all know that the number of testing kits available are right. very, very limited.
Exactly. And that's a very important
in America,
point.
They refused to do testing initially, only for certain people and for certain cases. Yes. You know?
But I think that he's talking specifically about the availability of the tests. This PCR test that they do through nasal swab. I mean, is this freely available all over China, where there's over 1 billion people? Is this test being given to all the poor people in India who are presenting with symptoms of respiratory distress? I mean, the answer is in the question. The authorities themselves have admitted we don't have enough tests to go around. So, of course, if it's not being, if it's being under-tested, it's being under-reported. It's basic logic.
This is a critical point. And thank you so much for this guidance caller, because it draws me to another point that I had in mind, where the NHS in the UK are only testing, and they have a cap. They had a cap initially of 15% of the staff. Now you imagine how they're in the front lines. These people every day are going out there, and they're being told that they don't have the necessary equipment. So they're going out there wearing trash bags. We're talking trash bags as gowns. They've been told in America through the CDC they can wear bandanas as a mask. Now, they're saying, but we're not sure this will be effective, but you can do that if you feel it's necessary. I mean, what are you saying here? Why haven't you implemented the strategy? Why aren't you protecting your frontline staff? Why aren't you protecting these people that are in the firing lines every day for the sake of humanity? Yes. This is nothing sort of tyrannical. And this has been something that could have been done, especially as at the same time, as we mentioned in the previous episode, they were diverting funds to the Defender 20 policy in Europe, where they were putting military hardware of 30,000 troops into Germany in terms of equipment, at the same time as people were having a lockdown in civilian life. Now, this is nonsensical. This is destructive and very evil, and that's the only way I can describe this.
Yes.
And this swabbing test that you talked about, this is critical, and they've only just introduced this as a law, as a mandatory rule amongst the NHS staff now. This should have been the first weapon against this, because in a case where we don't have a known pathology, we don't have a cure, then prevention must be the fundamental.
Yes. Yes. Sorry, is this Suleiman? You had anything else to add? Was there another question? Yes, go ahead.
I just want to remind everyone, if you remember very early on during this pandemic in China, the number of reported cases was rising at a certain rate.
Right.
Suddenly, when they re-evaluated the criteria as to which they are determining infections and death rates, there was a sudden spike. And then after that spike, if you actually check the statistics at the time, a few days after that, there was a sudden drop, because what they did is that they again re-evaluated the statistics and the way they are determining the infection rates and the death rates, which basically resulted in the numbers going down again. And it seemed like an artificial move to maybe make it seem as it's not as bad as everyone think it is. And so a number of infections were then labeled just as pneumonia.
Right.
A number of deaths were then linked to pneumonia, when in reality they could have very well been related to the virus.
Right. Exactly. I mean, in the name of saving the economy, in the name of profiteering and other such factors, I mean, the idea that there have only been 3,300 deaths in China, which is the latest figures that we have, is it's ludicrous.
It's absurd when it's a nation of 1.4 billion people.
Exactly.
And they're saying it supersedes, the figures in Italy are superseding that on much smaller
Right,
nation.
Especially what the caller said about the way the graph was going, and then suddenly there's a massive fall. So it's suspect at best.
Of course it is.
Yes, that's a very important point.
Exactly. There is no standardization for the way they are measuring infection rates and deaths. And I think this is just to add to your point. and to what we've heard recently, that the actual number of infections and deaths is significantly different than what is being mentioned.
Yes.
It is indeed,
So,
and the people on the ground in China are reiterating that. They're saying that there are potentially 800,000 deaths that have been attributed to this virus alone in the Wuhan province and Hubei province and beyond. And when you look at how they talk about the mortuaries and the body bags that are spilling over now, and they're saying in the funeral places they've got 40,000 urns coming out of these places. 40,000, when you're talking about 4,000 deaths, is a bit of a disproportionate amount. And they're saying they're working 24 hours a day now in the funeral parlours to manage the cremations. There's even some reports that they're burning bodies when they're still alive. One factor is because they're so scared, because they know that the virus is still on the body when it's dead, so they're so scared to touch the body that they're literally letting people who are not even necessarily dead go through this process. And there's a lot of reports, which is shocking. Where's the humanity here?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Was there any other point you wish to make, Suleiman, or?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your call.
Keep it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate that.
Yes.
So, I mean,
there are some important points, I think,
very important points. And what interestingly does is it leads us into a clip that I wanted to show. And it shows you how the system is so flawed, especially in the UK. And it's a very important clip that we have.
There has been confusion, mixed messaging and changes of policy in the past few weeks. This was an attempt to clear this up. The message from the chief scientific advisor has consistently been that a bad test is worse than no test. But even the current hospital tests, called PCR, done by swabbing up the nose and the back of the throat, are coming back negative when it is clear the patient has the virus.
And the doctor, when I was put onto a ward the following day, warned me that it might come back negative, and if it did, he wouldn't necessarily, in fact, he certainly wouldn't believe it. So, and then that turned out to be the case. The test did come back negative, and the way I knew that was because they came back again to put the long Q-tips down the back of my throat and up into my mind. So they did it again, and then I gathered the following day that it had not worked because they came and took me for a CT scan and looked at my lungs.
So today's promise of 100,000 tests a day by the end of the month, including with self-testing kits, will not translate into that.
So, I mean, that's just a demonstration of the test itself, the COVID-19 tests, and how it is inaccurate. It's not perfect, and there are cases being missed, cases that require a follow-up scan of your lungs, which shows fluid in the lungs. And then that's how the diagnosis is made. So that was a very, very clear video that shows the problem that's on the ground.
And that reminded me of the case that we mentioned briefly in the previous episode in Italy, where I think it was an actor who was quite famous. He was at home with his family, and his sister, who had been known to have other issues, such as epilepsy, she became very ill. They indicated it might be some kind of influenza. She was bedridden, and she had a test, but the test also was very delayed in its processing, and during that phase, that period, she actually passed away. And it took over 36 hours for someone to come and remove the body as well. And obviously, you imagine the trauma the family's going through at that stage. And as a result of that, they even declared at the outset, yes, she had died from her epilepsy. And they hadn't indicated, even though when the test did come through, it came back as positive, and then obviously she had contracted COVID.
Right.
But horrendously,
that's
deal with the case properly.
A very important point, and this is that the cause of death has to be, if any patient dies, even if it's from a clear cause like a heart attack, for instance, we cannot say that this is from a heart attack, and we cannot put that on their death certificate. A death must be, every patient who dies suddenly of suspicious circumstances, from heart problems to lung problems, must be tested for COVID in order to determine if the death was indeed from COVID or another cause. There are many patients dying, like you mentioned, this patient with epilepsy. Now, the cause of death is being written as epilepsy. But in reality, it was the COVID-19 that resulted in death.
Exactly.
So it's a very crucial point.
It is.
There are deaths happening, and not just in the West, around the world, and they're being attributed to other causes. And this, of course, is another point in favor of the fact that we are having underreporting of cases.
Exactly. And if in the case of the other guy we mentioned, the screenwriter, if he himself had passed away in that timescale before he had the CT scan, it would have been quite clear that they wouldn't have been able to attribute it to COVID because he had been tested as a negative at the time.
Right.
So there would have been another case. And these are just a few of the cases that we've come to light to know about.
Right.
And this is where they're supposedly having very accurate testing. So it draws all of this into stark a reminder for the people. Other points I'd like to mention relates back to the MOD, the Ministry of Defence in the UK, have refused to declare the number of cases attributed to the Ministry of Defence. Quite literally, most likely, because they still want to carry on with their exercises. They have exercises in Cyprus, they have exercises in Estonia. They've got over 20,000 troops still moving around that are on standby. And if it was brought to light that they had an epidemic within the army, would they still be allowed to continue with these measures? And this is a very disturbing point when we consider where the focus of the budgetary government budgets should be, and that's interestingly over 300 troops so in Aldershot in the UK are on lockdown because they are symptomatic. So what is going on here is another concern for me.
I mean, I think we've now talked about several very powerful points that demonstrate that COVID is difficult to diagnose. It has a presentation and then patients who have absolutely no symptoms. It's being that there is not enough testing kits available, and people dying are having other causes of death attributed to their as a cause of death. So, yes. With all of these factors, we have to now think about what the true number could be, because I think anybody with common sense can see that the true number is far greater than the number that is being reported.
So I think at this stage we can potentially mention what we know to be the true number.
Right.
I mean, look, this is a channel that has been given the gift through God to spread the truth about what is happening in the world today. We are operating through the divine protocol, through the divine wisdom of the man that comes in these times. We talked about these being epoch times. We talked about this at the time when all these key indicators are coming together. And of course, that means we have someone who's giving us this guidance, who is set apart from the rest of people to give us this wisdom and this knowledge. And we declare to you as a people today that the true figures that your governments, that your leaders are telling you is the actual truth are absolutely falsified, are completely wrong. And everybody knows in their hearts when they think for themselves that something very strange is going on in the world, where they're told that they cannot even go out of their houses to go and buy food. I mean, obviously they're saying you can buy a little bit of food, but they're really cutting down on everything. Then something is going on. And we declare today that those figures are very different, because the actual reality is we're looking at 3 million deaths from this coronavirus alone. That is from coronavirus. We're not talking about in conjunction with all the other things that have happened in the world today. We're not talking about these wars and rumours of wars that you hear every day. We're not talking about the crisis in Iraq. We're not talking about the crisis in Iran. We're talking about just coronavirus alone. 3 million deaths and 150 million people infected all over the globe. That is a pandemic. A pandemic which would justify what we're seeing as the lockdown today. But it also brings into stark reality how the governments, how the institutions and the media have lied to us and not even enforced this lockdown from the outset, when they knew full well from the likes of H1N1 what would be required. They had the template in place,
yes,
but they didn't act.
Right. So this number that James has quoted, this number of 3 million, I think this number, to the man with common sense, to the woman with common sense, to our dear audience who are watching us right now, they know that this number is much more likely closer to the real number. And the number that we're quoting you is from God. It is from the representative of God. We are living in very interesting times. And we represent that call that we are all expecting in this day and age, where the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, people are dying from famine, there is war and rumors of war. And at this time, we are bringing to you the glad tidings of the promised Mahdi, who is called Imam Mahdi and known as Imam Mahdi to the Muslims. But we also bring you glad tidings of Jesus and Moses and all of the prophets and the messengers. We are one human family, and this exposure to coronavirus should bring us all together. And at this time, if the medical community is honest, they have to confess and admit that they know very little about this virus. We don't know. There are reports emerging every day, briefings that the government is doing, which only reveal how ignorant we are about what this virus is and how to beat this virus. The best we can do and come up with, according to the chief immunologists and specialists who are advising the governments of the world, is that we practice social distancing, wash our hands, and preventative measures of this sort. There is no cure, no magic bullet, no injection to fight coronavirus. And it is at this time where something that we cannot see, smell, or hear, or touch, or taste has brought the human species to its knees. And in this time, we should have the humility to turn, if we believe in a power greater than us, and seek guidance through repentance, and know that God is merciful and loving, and seek for answers that were promised by all the prophets, Jesus, Muhammad, Elijah, and all of the other prophets promised us that this time will come when human beings will be in need of salvation. And we believe that this time is now. And the number of 3 million comes directly from the representative of God, the first Mahdi, Ahmad al-Hassan, who is the vicegerent and successor of Imam al Mahdi. He has also revealed that the number of cases of coronavirus, the number of infected cases, is not 1.2 million, but 150 million. And that's something to think about.
These figures are astronomical. I can't even grasp it in my head at the moment, but we have a caller, I think.
Yes.
If the caller's there, Asma from the UK, please come forth and speak to us. We'd love to hear from you. Please, we're open to you. Please, let us hear what you've got to say.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I wanted to say that, you know, a lot of people here in the UK are kind of relating it to 5G, and there's been a lot of conspiracy theories about it, and a lot of people are spreading one story or another, and a lot of people are starting to believe it, to the fact that they don't even think that it's a punishment from God. They just think that it's a man-made virus, which is from the 5G, and they're just starting to believe that.
I understand what you're saying, and in these times when we have had so many supposed conspiracy theories that have come true, when we look at what happened at 9/11, when we look what happened potentially with the likes of Princess Diana and all these incidents through history, we can see that if we look between the lines, we can see that there is a subplot. Now, interestingly, we know that many nations without 5G have the virus. And we also know that 5G is primarily a technology that has been introduced which has potential harm to human beings. But we know that this has got absolutely nothing to do with an actual virus. It's a this is entirely a punishment created from the sins of the people. But I can understand why people would think that if they don't have the opportunity to have this wisdom foretold and to reflect on that.
Yes. Thank you, Asma, for your question. And I think there's one point that I'd like to just pick up on that you made. The idea that God sends punishment. Now, the idea of God that the Mahdi, that Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, the promised Savior, has taught us that it is not the wrath of God that descends on the people. It is their own actions. It is our own indifference, our lack of compassion, our lack of humanity that manifests in the form of this virus. It is what the Eastern religions called karma. And It is that that is manifested as a punishment upon ourselves. I mean, we all saw the scenes of how the refugees were treated when they were escaping the dire conditions created by the West in Syria, for example, and how the kids were drowning in the Mediterranean and the Italian police were turning them away. I mean, it is acts like this that have resulted in the coronavirus. And it is not God who punishes, it is humanity punishing itself through its own choices. And I think that's the real distinction that I wanted to make. But thank you very much for your question. And I think if there's anything else you would like to add, please go ahead.
Also, I wanted to know if you can give advice on what to eat, because I know Imam Ahmad al-Hassan alayhi salam said to avoid meat and chicken. I wanted to know if fish is also allowed, and what about dairy products as well?
Yes.
Right. No, that's an excellent question. And the Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, peace be upon him, has certainly spoken about this. And the essence of the Imam's teaching is that this virus essentially feeds on and uses proteins from animal sources to assemble itself. So what do we mean by animal proteins? We mean milk, butter, cheese, yogurt, and of course meats. Fish has also been advised to steer clear of, because it's a protein from an animal. And the Imam has taught us that it is these proteins that we are consuming that actually the virus uses to make copies of itself. So the way the Imam has taught us is to deprive it of its source of nutrition by not consuming these things, by turning mainly to vegetables, to legumes, things like lentils and beans and plant-based proteins. And of course, we know for a fact, by well-established studies, that consumption of meat and other things like meat from animal-based proteins cause things like stomach cancers and prostate cancers and other things. There are other links as well. So that's the essence of the food and the diet. But in terms of other recommendations made by the Imam, the Imam alayhi salam has recommended that we drink plenty of water, because water is a great way to flush out toxins from the system. He has recommended sleeping early. So for example, not staying up excessively late. And of course we know this balances the hormones and the biological rhythms that the body works by. And of course this is another way to strengthen the immune system. The Imam has also recommended early morning exercise as a way to strengthen and build the immune system and to improve cardiovascular health. And I think if there's
an immune protection through, you know, obviously the vegetables and the fruits, so you have vitamin C, because we need plenty of vitamin C, and vitamin D as well, of course. Which, you know, outdoor exercise when we have more light in this time of year is very important as well.
Exactly.
So these are some of the fundamentals that have come through from the teachings of the Imam, peace be upon him. And he is our guide. And of course he opens a door for us, but we must enter, we must put these things into action. And it's great because what he's giving us is a proactive response. He's saying to us we don't have to just sit back and wait, whereas our global leaders are coming up with all these contradictory guidance. And even the supposed religious scholars are giving very strange secular guidance, you might say, to tell people to do certain acts, to take certain potions, but they're based with no wisdom behind them, whereas this is clear, simple guidance, and I hope that helps you, sister.
Just one more point I'd like to make. The Imam has declared to the world, as a challenge to the scholars who claim to be the representatives of God on the earth, that he indeed has a cure for this coronavirus. Something which the billions of dollars of research money that is being pumped into these labs, these microbiologists, the medical community has no answer for this. But the Imam, as a proof of being God's vicegerent, his representative in the creation, has set it as a challenge to anyone who seeks from God the cure. We are willing to give the cure. But the people will not ask, and they do not turn to God. And this is our time, this is our opportunity. Like the people of Jonah. Our time to turn to God. The punishment is hanging over us, but we still have a choice. And such is the mercy of God.
Yes, of course it is. And it's a miracle that the wisdom is there. But of course, if this is a man of God, then of course Okay, you're still there, caller, because basically this is maybe new information for you. So is there anything you'd like to reflect on from what the doctors said about what the words of the Imam have been? Any reflections? Are you still there?
Is there any news? Are you still there? Hello?
Hello?
Yes,
Yeah.
hi. So
Have you got any reflections on that? I mean, and I'm sure you're finding that in the UK the reports and the guidance is so contradictory from different doctors, from different politicians. It must be leaving people feeling more and more scared rather than reassured. Is that how it feels in the UK at the moment?
Yes, it's a lot of fear here, because of the reports. They're exaggerating it a lot. They put a lot of fear in people. First they say that the virus is airborne, then they say that it can last on surfaces. I mean, then they're saying to the point where as soon as you enter your homes, you've got to take your shoes off because it can last on your shoes. They're just putting fear in people day by day.
Yeah, of course they are. But the clear reality is they just don't know the guidance. They don't have a grasp of the reality of the situation. So they're stabbing in the dark. And that is a reality for the people if they don't seek and find the caller for truth, because he will guide us through this path, through this dark phase. But that's why it's such a blessing to have this opportunity and have this knowledge bestowed upon us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving us a call today, and I hope things are okay for you and your family members, and you can keep striving through this period.
And thank you very much for your call. We just wanted to end by saying that there is hope and there is a cure, and all we need to do is turn to God, and we will know the cure, inshallah.
Exactly, and Doctor, I just wanted to note on another point, and if this man of God, was in any way seeking self-affirmation from the people, if he was seeking for people to promote him, then he would be banding the cure about. But he's saying, no, come to me and humble yourselves for the one true God, and the knowledge will come to you. Exactly. Rather than going around banding it about and then having it proven that he's correct, and then people elevating him in that way. Yes. And that's a true sign that he is a man of God. Right. Because otherwise he would be doing that, wouldn't he? Okay. Because that is what the scholars do. If they have any influence or opportunity where they think they know the truth, of course they're going to band it about, because they want that affirmation. They want someone to turn around and say, look at me. Right. Which is a very significant point. And so that is a clear sign and a blessing for the people to behold. But we know that this isn't just that we're talking about. We've mentioned how the preparation for these pandemics have been upon the people, because we've had, in a short space of time, we've had the likes of H1N1, we've had the likes of SARS, we've had the likes of MERS and Ebola. And the Obama administration were a key witness to this. They were setting up preparedness in terms of the homeland security, in terms of the airlines, the health and human services. But despite that playbook, once it came into path that the replacement of the Trump administration, they did not continue with that policy. They rejected that policy. The National Security Advisor. Why did they do that when they knew that we were in an era of pandemics? And even Bill Gates was proposing there would be more pandemics. It seems like this is another sign of their complete lack of regard for what they should be focusing their resources and their energies on.
Right. Absolutely.
Which is very disturbing. And we can show a short clip to exemplify that, so it'll be clip number 4, I think it is.
Almost all testing is analysed in hospital and public health laboratories, and there's a problem. They're struggling to keep up with the workload. Till this week, they'd been told to only test patients. The representative of trusts in England told me a shortage of raw materials was a concern.
Everybody will be working as hard as they can to increase the number of staff tests, but we just need to remember there are some severe shortages of both swabs and reagents. So one trust said to me today that they've only got 3 swabs per day to test staff.
The first coronavirus cases in the UK were announced on the 31st of January. Testing of all recent contacts of cases was adopted. On the 11th of March, the government announced an aim of 10,000 tests a day. A week later, the Prime Minister said this would be more than doubled.
We will massively scale up our testing capacity in the weeks ahead so that we hit 25,000 tests a day.
By this time, testing was focused on NHS patients, not in the community. On the 19th of March, I asked the government's chief medical advisor why NHS staff weren't being tested.
The ability to test their staff, our staff, particularly if they've got mild symptoms that mean that they could normally go back to work, is absolutely critical.
But it wasn't until the 29th of March when hospitals in England were told to allocate 15% of testing to staff. Today they were told do as many as possible. By yesterday the number tested was still just below 10,000. And tonight the Prime Minister felt obliged to make a new pledge.
And I want to say a special word about testing because it is so important. And as I've said for weeks and weeks, this is the way through. This is how we will unlock the coronavirus puzzle. This is how we will defeat it in the end.
Okay, folks, so here we have more clear evidence, whether it's in the USA, whether it's in the UK, that the likes of Trump, the ones that are saying you must have testing, you must wear masks, are themselves not putting these actions into place. Social distancing, we're shaking hands here if we're Boris Johnson. If we're Trump, we're telling people not to wear, to wear proper masks, and they're not wearing the masks. So they're contradicting, as we said in the previous episode, where we talked about 1 minute they're saying it's a hoax, they're next saying that there'll be a miracle cure, but no, there are going to be many deaths. Then they say there's going to be 100,000, we'll cut it down from 2.2 million. And then in the next sentence, they're saying there are going to be hundreds of thousands of deaths and it's not going to go away. When they said in April it would go away. It would go away once the weather warms up. So when people are faced with these contradictions, it is a very disturbing matter indeed. Now, we have more revelations for the people as well today. Not only are we declaring to you the true number of infections are much greater, there was another point that ties in with that just sprung to mind. It was the cessation of testing. Now, if we take the case of Iran, a key point we forgot to mention, I think we should mention this because you mentioned this. In Iran, because of the magnitude of the the magnitude of the cases, because of the overwhelming pressure on the medical services, another nation that has had a stranglehold on its resources because of the US sanctions, which is another key indicator of the oppression. These people have stopped testing. So how can we have clear data on that basis? I just wanted to raise that point again.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, you know, there is a difference between informing the people of the truth. I mean, look, in the name of not preventing mass panic and chaos and disorder, does this give the government the right to lie to the people? Because when you don't test, you don't know the prevalence of a disease. You don't know its incidence, how fast it's increasing. People should not people be given the right to know the truth so that they can make the judgment calls? Isn't it the right of the government to allow the people to make informed choices? And by not testing, that brings up that argument as well, that by not testing, it is not giving us a true reflection of how serious and contagious this brand of coronavirus really is.
And one final point on that matter, we mentioned it last time, but I have to mention it again. At the outset, the US administration under Trump, they refused the WHO testing kits. They declined to accept them as a free testing kit. And another point that just sprung to mind, they have intercepted or tried to intercept testing kits destined for Germany to take them upon themselves. And we see here nation against nation competing for resources because the people are not aligning in a human way. Right. And we see that within states. The state of New York City has demanded, not even demanded, it is begged for other states to send over medical staff, medical resources to help them. And then we have bidding wars between states over medical equipment. Right. This is insanity. You know, it should be going to those that need. And then what they're trying to tell us is, well, if we don't have enough ventilators, if we don't have enough emergency resources, then IC units will have to operate in the level that only certain people are treated. And how are they going to evaluate that? Well, perhaps that person is likely to die more. Perhaps that person is likely more useful to society. They are of a working age. They'll be able to support us, support the system, whereas someone who's slightly elder perhaps is cannon fodder or surplus to requirements. And when you treat humanity like this is disgusting and tyrannical again, especially when we know that they have the resources to help everyone and they've got the preparedness awareness.
Yes.
We have another caller, Minal from Egypt. Please, the lines are open if you want to speak to us.
Hello, Manal. Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
I think she might have lost us. Is she still there? Please speak out, Manal.
Hello, is that Manal from Egypt?
Manal from Egypt, can you hear us? The line's open. Okay, we'll try one more time.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome.
Welcome to us on the Pandemic Show. What would you like to say, please?
This is Manal from Egypt. I would like to give you, I thought of like sharing the post of the Ministry of Health that was announced actually it was like announced yesterday at around 10 p.m.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
Sorry, I cannot hear you.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Manal, please.
We can hear you clearly.
Yes, actually, it's the numbers that have been announced are truly hilarious. They said that we have the total number of cases are 1,070.
Right.
This is in Egypt.
Out of which 5 deaths, only 5 deaths in Egypt.
Wow. It's ludicrous. I don't know whether to laugh or cry about that.
Exactly, and 85 new cases. And so the new deaths that were within the last couple of days were only 5.
Right.
But now we have a total of 71 out of 1,070 cases. This is really hilarious.
Yeah.
And this is a nation with a huge population, isn't it? And a very dense population.
Sorry?
This is a nation, Egypt, with a huge population and a very densely populated, especially in Cairo.
Yes, of course. We have 100 million people in Egypt.
Exactly.
And this number is the total of Egypt. We're talking about
Right.
not in Cairo alone.
Right. And another, I think that's very interesting because another comparative country, another country with even a greater population density is India, where they're estimating the number of deaths from coronavirus to be 83. So, I mean, when you hear figures like this, and it's very interesting, and thank you for sharing those figures, I think it just drives home the point that it's almost insulting the intelligence of the people, the governments of the world. They are making absolutely ludicrous figures and that just do not reflect the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you have any other questions?
Anything else you'd like to say there, Manal?
Yes, I would just like to share something that was happening.
Okay, please go ahead.
Recently, the president, the Sisi president, has been sending all the medical supplies to Italy through planes, and he's sending 2 more planes with all the masks and gloves, etc. While really in Egypt, all the hospitals do not have these medical supplies. The Egyptians are starting to get quite furious, saying, "What is he intending to do?"
That's insane.
The problem is, for example, we have some really very big hospitals, for example, the National Cancer Institute. Right now, this National Cancer Institute has 71 recorded cases within the medical staff. I'm talking about the medical staff. I'm not talking about the patients. And they have been trying to reach to the ministry to tell them, we don't have any supplies. However, we don't know what exactly he's thinking.
Right.
Some say it's so some people are saying either it's because it's trying to do some political, something
political maneuver.
Right. With Italy.
Right. Oh, that's...
Because this doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense even from the aspect of disaster capitalism, does it? Where you'd be making money from it, because it wouldn't justify the financial gain from that. And they're probably not even charging for the medical equipment they're sending.
Yes. I mean, is this an act of nobility? Or is this just downright stupidity in the name of, improving international relations? I mean, yes, of course, our heart goes out to the people of Italy who have been struck by this virus in a very harsh way. And but I think it's questionable. I think in a country like Egypt, where supplies are so minimal, where if an outbreak were to happen in a country like Egypt, and then they're sending the supplies to a country with the wealth of Italy, it's preposterous.
It's insanity, because they will just basically have no ability to cope or manage anything. The people will be on the streets, as we've seen in the likes of Ecuador, where there are people piling up, where there are people who are dying who are on the streets now because they cannot get the medical treatment they need. And this is another clear sign where in a world of equality, supposedly we see how so many nations have not got the resources, so people are sending them here, they're sending them there. The likes of Cuba are trying to support other nations, and we have Albania and smaller European nations sending resources to Cuba and having them intercepted and told by the likes of the USA that they are not to have these resources. And here again we see this stranglehold. It's happening all over the world, and in Egypt and all these places.
Yes.
It is disgusting.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for your call. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Goodbye.
So, I mean,
I think now is the perfect time, actually. I think it brings us to the idea of the coronavirus. Is this as bad as it gets, or does it get worse? Mm-hmm. Now, we've been told that 1.2 million people approximately have the virus, whereas in reality
the figure's very different.
God and His representative are telling us it's 150 million. Now, these are astronomical numbers.
Yeah, of course they are.
We know very little about this virus. The future is uncertain and unpredictable. With this virus, we don't know what's going on. The question now is that, does it get worse? Mm. Is there more to come? Does this virus have any other presentations, any other problems that we currently don't have any idea of? So another big revelation that we would like to share with you as a proof of the truth of the call of Imam al Mahdi, the Black Banners of the East Satellite Channel exclusively would like to say that the Mahdi has said that this virus we haven't seen the end of. Yeah. And there is more to come. And we are not saying this in the name of doom and gloom, but in the name of telling you the truth. What is to come are other complications. So far, from our understanding, this is a virus that attacks the respiratory system, our breathing apparatus. But actually, what the Mahdi is saying is that this virus attacks other organs as well.
Exactly.
And although we have now epidemiologists studying the various different symptoms of the virus, and they have reported that we also get gastrointestinal symptoms, like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. These things have also been reported. Headache, muscle ache. Yeah. What none of them have come forward with and said is that this virus, as the Imam has said, Ahmed al-Hassan, the promised Yamani, the vicegerent and successor of Imam al Mahdi, has said, this virus will also attack the nervous system. And we will see symptoms of the nervous system being attacked. And it pains me and saddens me to say this, but this virus will produce other symptoms that we have not yet heard of. Things like seizures, things like muscle wasting, things like weakness, muscle weakness.
Yeah. I mean, it brings to mind, like we talked about CJD, the potential for having brain disorders, mental disturbances, all these things which are the most disturbing forms of injury, because if it's a brain injury, you lose cognition.
Exactly.
You lose the ability to function as a human being, and this would be then a breakdown in global affairs. This would be a complete catastrophe for human civilization, and this is something that is coming to the people. Least we repent, and this is why we have to keep highlighting this point. And what is repentance? Repentance is breaking from our original sin, breaking from habits that we have constructed in our lives, from starting to show humility and love and kindness for our fellow man, to sharing what we have with our fellow neighbour, and not, as we see the government leaders doing, stealing and fighting over resources, and projecting lies and deceit amongst the people. And this is a fundamental point that we have to consider.
Yes.
And this is what is happening now, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think we have to also look at this virus. Is there a precedent before where it has happened that a virus came in 2 waves? Yeah. Has a virus in the past undergone a mutation where the same virus with a different strain has come? Yeah. The answer is yes. There is a very vivid example for us to reflect upon. And that is the example of the Spanish flu, which happened in 1918 and killed between 50 and 100 million people. Now, this virus presented in the spring of 1918. And the initial virus would cause symptoms like a flu. Yeah. Yes, people died from it. But the second wave of this virus came in the form of a tsunami, because the second wave of this virus produced a mutation that caused symptoms, that caused people to bleed from their ears and their nose. And this second wave is what killed up to, by conservative estimates, 100 million people in the aftermath of the Second World War. So we have examples from our history that tell us that this is possible. We hope this does not happen with the coronavirus. We pray it doesn't help. We pray that God will avert this from us, the human family. And it's in our hands. We have the choice now to acknowledge that we have no answers for this virus. And we have to turn to a power that I said before, that is greater than our own, and seek the answers from God and His vicegerent.
Yeah. I mean, as we know, with the Spanish flu, people were drowning in their own phlegm by the end. People were dropping down dead in the streets.
Exactly.
These are all things that could potentially happen if we do not return. And we see how, once again, the likes of Trump, he is diverting his resources to Venezuela. He's put a bounty on the head of the likes of Maduro, the leader there, and he wants regime change because he wants to control the oil. He's even sent military hardware again into the Caribbean Sea. He's got a whole army set up there to implement this change, and the IMF bank linked to that are offering loans on the basis of protecting the Venezuelans against this virus on the basis that they accept regime change. So here we see conditions being applied. All of these things are clear, stark warnings that the leaders are not going to offer us these solutions. The leaders are not going to help pave the way for this. And this is something that we have to remind ourselves of. It's not going to come through the leadership that we're going to get the protection we need for the people. And it's something we have to clearly indicate. And as it says in the Holy Scriptures, God does not change the condition of the people unless they change what's in themselves.
Yes.
And we have to do that. We have to take heed of all this. And as you mentioned, at the time of the people of Jonah, these were the people that were living in a brutal way often. They weren't looking out for each other, but they started to think to themselves, perhaps there's another way. We look out for each other. We look out for our fellow man. Yes. We put their needs in front of our own, and perhaps things will change. And God came down on these people and bestowed them with protection and released the torment and the punishment from the people. So there is hope.
Yes.
There is hope. Hope springs eternal.
Absolutely.
And we were promised that the riser would come after the contagious diseases. Right. So He is coming for the people. So God bless you all, and please stick with us as we reveal so much more and offer you cures and protection from this for those with eyes to see and ears open to this wisdom.
Thank you very
so
much for joining us.
Today.
Thank you.